Welcome to Money Matters. I'm Emily Johnson, Certified Financial Planner and Managing Director of Polaris Capital Advisors. I'm joined as always by David Kroll of Mortgage Network, and we are here to discuss all things where your money matters. This week we'd like to focus half of the show anyway on education planning, because obviously graduation is right around the corner, high school, college, etc. And with that in mind, obviously probably college planning and or college financing is on the mind of those whose children are about to launch into college or are currently in college, and maybe you're getting a pay raise because one of your children is about to graduate from college, God willing. So we wanted to focus at least a portion of the show on that, because we have a really positive market these days. Everybody's sort of feeling the revenue effect. NASDAQ just hit all new highs, et cetera, et cetera. So money is starting to flow again, little by little. Certainly not, as it did perhaps 10 years ago, when with the highs in the market the way it was at that point. But money's starting to flow again. So when it comes to education, certainly people's eyes are opened by the cost of college at this point. And if you have been looking at any of these costs, if you have children, have young children, have grandchildren, and you've been looking at what college costs these days, whether it's in-state or out-of-state, you will see that it ain't nothing like it was when you were in school, when I was in school, when you were in school, etc. So we have had huge education inflation. It is multiples of what our normal inflation is in the regular economy. I don't know exactly what it was last year. I want to say it was actually in the single digits last year. In other years, it's actually been upwards of 14%, depending on what type of education we're looking for. So not to scare you by any means. I know you have at least a few that are already through college. I've got one that will be there in about 10 years, which scares the pants off of me. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the different ways to look at education funding. Is that okay with you to start
Absolutely.
out with?
Start.
Okay. So some basic ways that you can look at education funding, regardless of what age your child is. Number one is going to be 529s. So if you've heard of in South Carolina, there's something called the Future Scholars 529 Plan. And that is really sort of the end-all be-all when it comes to for savings for college. The reason is because you can contribute to those funds and you get a state tax deduction for the funds that you contribute. So in my case, I have a little girl and I have a 529. I am the owner of those funds. She is ultimately the beneficiary of those funds, which means I actually control them. So if she decides she doesn't want to go to college, or if there's another child that comes along that I might want those funds to go to, I have control of these funds, not my daughter, unlike with a custodial account or UGMA like you might be familiar with at your local bank. I have control of these funds forever, no matter what. If she goes to college, then we'll use them for that purpose. If she doesn't go to college, then perhaps they'll get moved to another child. So I will get a state tax deduction for every dollar that I contribute to that 529. Second most important aspect is, of course, that control issue, because regardless, you don't know where your child, when your child might go to college. Hopefully they go, at some assumed time frame, but may or may not know. So by having control of those funds, you have control of how the funds are going to be distributed. The purpose of them is going to be used for college expenses, tuition and fees, etc. The funds can be used for summer programs. They can be used for vocational schools. There's all kinds of accredited uses for these funds. And when those funds come out of a 529, they're tax-free. So if you start early and continue with that plan, you have a really wonderful nest egg that you can use for your child or your grandchildren's education. The third most important thing is going to be the tax deferral of the funds inside of 529. So every dollar that is contributed is going to grow tax deferred the exact same way, or tax free if it's used for college expenses. But every single dollar that is contributed will grow tax deferred or tax free depending on its use. So it's similar in a way to your to your 401k or your IRA, in that when the funds, every single year the funds grow tax-free, it's not going to end up on your 1099 every year, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another really important aspect. And then lastly, at least in my opinion, is the fact that it's transferable. So if, for example, my daughter does not go to college, or she gets an amazing tennis scholarship after all this tennis that we've been doing, then those funds I could actually transfer within my bloodline. So I could transfer them to my niece, my nephew. I could actually use them if I want to go back to school. So there's a lot of benefits, a lot of flexibility to these funds. They're not a use it or lose it type scenario. So that's sort of your biggest and best bet when it comes to education savings, education, not so much financing, but education savings. Another option is going to be something called an ESA, which is it's much more limited. You can only contribute, I believe, it's about $2,000 a year. The difference between an ESA and a 529, in addition to the dollar amount you can contribute, because a 529 you can contribute sizable amounts of money, is that you can use the ESA funds for lower school. So you can use them for kindergarten through grade 12. Again, it's a lower amount of money, so if we're looking at private school funding, $2,000 probably isn't going to get you too far, but it is another option, and certainly I always talk with grandparents that are looking for ways that they can help finance their kids' education. So anyway, so those are sort of two of the biggies, and I get that question all the time these days, especially with parents that are about to be filling out FAFSAs, which is, I think it's worse than filling out stuff for a mortgage. I really do.
It is. The difference between the FAFSA and the mortgage is that with the mortgage, we're here to help you and to fill it out with you and to counsel you as you're filling it out. Usually the FAFSA is filled out at 11 o'clock at night at the kitchen table.
And I get the phone call the next morning.
You have no idea how to fill it out.
Exactly. It's definitely hieroglyphics.
Yeah.
But the other thing I really wanted to stress in talking about this education financing, education funding, and we kind of do this every single year, it seems, it's just a theme in May, and that is making sure, especially right now, whether your child has already decided on which school they're going to or is making that decision, maybe they're in the fortunate spot that they might have some scholarship and or grant opportunities, whether it's athletic or merit-based, and if that's the case, really sit down with them and go through the hard numbers. And I know when clients come in and, with their children, and I do that with their children, I seem like I'm not the best person in the world. They never leave thinking, wow, I really love Emily Johnson. Their parents do. But what we really need to look at is that overall cash flow, what the cash flows are going to be after college, who's going to be paying the bill. These days, financing, education financing has really, really changed. The loans that are available now are primarily going to be available to the parents for undergraduate. In years past, many of those loans were available to students first, which means it was in the name of the student, and the student could borrow significantly more monies for college. That ended, it hasn't ended, but it has certainly been curtailed with the large number of defaults that has occurred because college costs have gone up so much and real wages have not gone up. So if my daughter is going to school for $50,000 a year or $44,000 a year and she's taking out a loan or I'm taking out a loan for 90% of that, she goes on spring break and all the other wonderful things that go with it, and we end up with school loans of somewhere in the neighborhood of $150,000, $175,000. These days, the interest rate on that is going to be 6-7%, and my daughter hopefully is going to be making some money, but most likely she's not going to be making more than say $30,000, $40,000, just as it was when I graduated from college. So you really need to look at that long-term cost of the debt, who's going to be carrying it, what the carrying costs are going to be, what is a realistic assumption of how much money the children are going to be making when they graduate from college. I love when I speak with really, really smart kids that are looking at phenomenal schools and I ask them what they're going to do and they say, not really sure yet. And you look at mom and dad sitting there with their head in their hands because they know that their child is going to be successful, but they're also looking at $150,000 of debt. And it's something that kids just really cannot comprehend until they or their parents are looking down the barrel at it. So really take the opportunity to ask all the questions of the financial aid office. Bombard them with questions. Get every piece of information you can. There's really wonderful resources online for this. This is one where I would say, do your Wikipedia searches, and there's a lot of other resources for that. But take a look at what that's going to mean to your long-term plan, because it's not just your kid's future that you're looking at this point. It really is that debt that you're going to be saddled with, if you end up, taking on some of these additional school loans. So again, it's a great time now to sit down with your financial planner. Even if you don't have a financial planner and you want to go and get that kind of advice, there are financial planners that will give that kind of advice on an hourly basis. They'll look over everything for you. There are financial planners that specialize in FAFSAs. So it's really, really important to pick up the phone and and ask those questions. I know I love it when I get those questions because I know that hopefully I'm helping somebody to, one, make a decision that they're comfortable with, and two, to avoid some potentially difficult times in the future, because these debts are significant. So anyway, it's a really wonderful opportunity, lots and lots of things out there, lots of opportunities for savings on the front end, and lots of opportunities for assessing different financing opportunities on the back end. So make sure that you ask those questions. Now I've finished my monologue. I've gone full 10 minutes. So please stick with us. We'll be right back with the second half of the show, a little bit more Money Matters, in just a minute. Thanks very much.